That was Sor's exercise number 1 from Opus 35, 24 exercises, subtitled Andante, or could be titled Andante, using the metronome marking as its title. If you're interested in learning and playing this piece, I have the sheet music of my edition available on my website. The links are down below in the description. I have a free notation version as well as a edition which comes fully fingered, as well as tablature, as well as a blank edition for you to put in your own markings if you choose. My edition, the original Sor has a lot of left-hand fingerings, but there are really no right-hand fingerings. And so when I teach this piece, I provide a lot of right-hand directions so that way it's very easy to play. And I've provided that fingering in my edition. So let's go through this piece and have a short little lesson on it. The piece is titled Andante, or the tempo is Andante. I chose to have it at half note equals 72. Really thinking of this piece, even though it's written in common time, 4/4 time, 4 beats per measure, the piece really does take on new life when you think of it either in 2, or you can even think of it in 1 if you're comfortable doing that. That allows you to feel the progression of the piece with the movement of the chord structure, because usually it's 1 chord per measure. So if you're feeling that chord change as your beat, it smooths it out, and I think it allows you to give a little bit more rubato subtleties within the measure and within the shape of the melodic line. Anything faster than 72 to a half note or quarter note equals 144, I think it becomes a little bit too frantic and becomes less musical and more like just a finger exercise. So I found that 144 for me is a very good tempo for this. Going over the sections real quickly, this piece has 3 sections in it. It's in an A, B, C, A prime form. And the way that I've arranged it on the sheet music is that every 2 lines is a section. So the first 2 lines are the A section, second 2 is the B section, third 2 is the C section, and the final 2 lines is the A prime section, as well as each phrase, which is 4 bars long, takes up a single line. So visually, it's very easy to see the structure of the piece, and I purposely notated the piece this way, so that way you can see these phrases and you can see the structure of the piece easily. So let's take a look at the A section of this piece. And in the very first 2 measures has the trickiest right hand passage. And I'll show you how I work with my students on getting the exchange, especially between the A and the M fingers, which have difficulty exchanging from one another. So looking at the right hand fingering, if we take out the first C with the middle finger, we have almost a complete P-I-M-A-M arpeggio. If we were to translate that, it's very familiar, very close to a P-I-M-A-M-I arpeggio, going up and then coming back down. And so I group those 5 beats together as an arpeggio. So within that arpeggio, when my A finger plucks, I release M and I, and I pluck my middle finger on the high G. In that way. But however you work out that P-I-M-A-M-I arpeggio will work there. You obviously just don't have the I finger following the M. So I group those 5 together. And then if you look at the last 3 beats of measure 2, it's just an A-M-I arpeggio in the right hand. Very common grouping of fingers. And so what you want to do is you want to practice those 2 like they're 2 separate arpeggios. And you might want to first start with playing, just sort of taking a C chord that way. Where the middle finger isn't going to play the first string again, but it'll play the second string, P-I-M-A-M. As that gets comfortable, then incorporate the middle finger going up to the first string, as well as putting the pinky down for the G. Now, if doing both of those are a little bit difficult, you can do just a double open E at the top, that way, and then get your fourth finger to come down. You practice that arpeggio until it becomes comfortable in your hand. You're looking for it to flow out of the hand. You're looking for it to, for you not to stumble over the finger. And you want to know where your notes are. You want to know where the strings are in the right hand. Now for the second arpeggio, the AMI arpeggio, it's the same thing. You practice that arpeggio, getting comfortable with the movements and breaking it up. Once you have those two right hand patterns comfortable, now you can start to put them together, and what we're going to do is we're going to add a pause in between the first beat and the second beat of the second measure. And so we're going to play P-I-M-A-M. I'm going to pause. During this pause, I'm going to set up for my AMI arpeggio. And once I'm ready, I'm going to go A-M-I. I'm going to have a pause, and that pause can be, I would say, err on the side of that pause being longer. Gives you a chance to let the hand relax, because what we're going to do is on that middle finger, you're going to reset the hand. You're going to let the fingers relax and let the hand open up, and you're going to get it set up for the AMI arpeggio. So once again, it's P-I-M-A-M, and notice that my hand just sprung back into a neutral place, and now I've got A-M-I. And as that becomes more comfortable, can start to make the space closer and closer to where you have it sounding like this. And now as I play through those two measures, I'm not thinking about what I practiced in the right hand. I'm just letting the notes come out, and I'm playing it. I'm just playing the music. And I'm relying on the detailed practice work that I have built up by doing lots of repetitions, by breaking down those two measures into two different groups, and that's how I've trained my hand to play that section. And so if you're unfamiliar with an arpeggio or using the A finger in this kind of way where there's lots of alternation between M and A, it's going to take some time for you to group it in this way and for your hands to get comfortable with it. And my recommendation is not to force it, but rather really strive to make each fingering of each arpeggio, the P-I-M-A-M arpeggio and then the A-M-I arpeggio, to feel comfortable and to feel fluid in your playing before you start to bring them together and then do it with no pauses. It does take a little bit of time if you're unfamiliar with it, but if you give it a little bit of time every day, this is something that you could do 5 minutes a day while practicing this piece. As you learn more of the piece, as you get more comfortable, this concept will be there. And it's a way that I practice this, in working on this piece. This is how I practice that fingering to get it smooth in my hand. And when I have other arpeggio patterns that maybe have lots of M and A stuff, I approach it that way, so that way my hand doesn't tighten up and I don't force the arpeggio to happen, but rather I've grouped it in different ways, and I've created moments in the arpeggio that I can relax and have things move fluidly. Left hand wise, for those two measures, that third finger staying down can be a little bit problematic when you go to use the fourth finger. And what I do is I actually bring my arm back to help out my pinky a little bit. And it sort of pulls you out of the standard classical guitar position, and actually my third finger is actually leaning against that fourth string, but it doesn't matter because I'm not playing that fourth string. So it's one of those things where instead of trying to really curl that finger and I got a buzz there, I just pull the elbow back a little bit to help bring the pinky to that note. And then when I come off of it, my arm comes back down. Another left hand tip is to keep the thumb a little bit higher up on the neck of the guitar. I'm not down in the middle this way. Just doesn't give me the support that I want. So I'm actually sort of on top of the rounded part a little bit on this chord. And that just gives me the support that I want to have for that chord. And oftentimes when you're playing lower strings, my thumb is pretty high up on the neck of the guitar. So I balance the chord in the left hand for that lower note, not for the higher note to where I'm reaching this way, but rather my fingers curl to get the upper strings. Between measures 2 and 3, we have a repeated fingering of P and I. And so if you're not comfortable with that, that might trip you up a little bit. I really try to stick to alternating fingers and using the A finger to create good string crossings. But every once in a while, I put in a repeated finger because that's sort of the best solution. So in that case, you want to practice a quick release, which is letting the fingers relax right after they're done playing. Then you add in the left hand to that. The piece is going slow enough to where that's not going to really trip up anything. If it was a much faster piece, I would probably work out a right hand fingering that didn't include a repeated fingering. Phrasing wise, we can use the chord progression of the A section to really help us out in finding the peaks and valleys to the harmonic progression. Aside from just following the melodic contour, the chord progression will add tension to the music and help move it along. So we've got a C major chord for 2 measures. Then we get a D minor over F. Then we have a G7 chord. Now that G7 chord is a little weird because it doesn't follow the cowboy chord shape. So if you're not familiar with building chords, that might throw you for a loop as to understanding, wow, this is a G7. How can that also be a G7? And the reason why is that they're the same notes, just in a different order. Phrasing from the first phrase to the second phrase, I like to think of this F as a pickup note to measure 5. And I like to hear that voice leading. So as I'm playing, I want to hear that resolution as I go through. So I'm kind of creating a little bit of a pickup with that F going to E. Then I'm also eliding the phrase, so I hear the resolution on on measure 5, and then I keep going. So we'll take it from measure 3. So those are little moments of time that I want to bring out. I think they are musically interesting, and it's nice to have that bass line move. Measure 7 is another D minor over F, G, C. So measure 5, we've got our C chord. Measure 7, we have our D minor to G, and then measure 8 is cadenced on C. And so that harmonic progression as we go through C, C, a little bit more tense, then to C, this measure 6. We can use that harmonic movement to help add to the musical tension that is created through the piece. The B and C sections of this piece are similar texturally, where in the A section and the A prime section we have pretty much a arpeggio style melody, or an arpeggiated melody with held bass notes. In the B and C sections, measure 9 through measure 24, we have this alberti bass figure with moving tenths in the left hand. And really, we're going from a 2-voice texture in the A and A prime section to a 3-voice texture. We have the bass, or rather the bass, the melody, and the inner voice. So we want to keep that G quiet. We don't want that G to be so loud. And in fact, in Sor's version, he's a little inconsistent with his notation. So sometimes the melody is given its own independent rhythm, and sometimes the melody, looks like in that way. So in creating this edition, I kind of tried to make that a little bit simpler and create a visually easier time for you to see the different textures. So there are times in the B and C section where you're going to notice the texture drop to two voices sort of suddenly. And that's just, again, a clearer notation. So for instance, in measure 10, we've got the D followed by 3 Gs. And those Gs aren't part of the melody, but it's just clearer notation-wise to not have 3 voices. And we're going to assume that that D note is going to sustain. So instead of sounding like this, it's going to sound like this. I'm going to keep those Gs quiet. And more importantly, I'm going to keep that D ringing. I want to hear that D as a melody rather than cutting it off or lifting up that note. And that is throughout both the B and the C section when you see those. There are also times where those quarter notes are actually going to be melodic notes. If, for instance, measure 15, we have that. Those notes in that measure and then the following Gs. You can sort of use those to lead into the next section, or in that way as well. But you have a little bit of some freedom and liberty in sections like that of how you would like to phrase them. Ending the C section now, going from measure 24 into 25, again, I like to use bass notes in the descending voice as sort of pickups to bring me into the next section. They work really well to lead. So there are two ways that you can think of this. You can either think of the notes going G, F, D, that way, or 2 beats. I personally like the 2 beats better than the 3 beats as I'm playing through. So if I'm playing through here, that works with the rhythmical structure, but there's no one saying that you can't do the G as part of that. You can do it that way as well. I think that that's a little bit of personal preference, but I do like to separate that, at least in my mind, note grouping wise, so that way I have a clear idea as to where my notes are going and where I'm resolving to. The A prime section is a lot of the same material from the beginning. We have some changes in bass notes where we go to an E instead of holding that C. Again, I have that repeated I finger. Now here, measure 27, you're going to notice that even though it's the same notes as measure 3, I'm using a different fingering. And the reason for that is for right hand ease into the melodic line, because the line goes somewhere different. Now, to end this piece, in measure 30, there's a really cool implied 3-voice texture here. Even though we have a single arpeggio there, and it looks like it's a single line, I like to think of that E carrying over and resolving to the D. So as I'm playing, is the sound that I want. So this A, I'm going to treat as an inner voice and would sound like this. That's a nice little thing that really, I think, brings that section together, because this E is really resolving to that D musically. And we're just sort of, it's a suspension in that D minor chord. Another thing that you could do if you don't want to reach that first finger and curl it for the F, you could do a hinge bar. That way. And I go back and forth between using a hinge bar or not. I don't have that notated. but you could certainly do so. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this lesson on Sor's exercise number 1 from Opus 35. Once again, if you want this sheet music, it's available for purchase on my website. The link is in the description below. There are 2 versions that I have available, just a strictly notation version available for download, as well as an edition that includes a fully fingered notation, tablature version, as well as a blank version that you can use to put in your markings. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this piece. Go ahead and sound off in the comments below if you've worked on this piece before, if some of these tips have helped you, if you have other ideas that maybe I didn't go over. Feel free to comment below. I'd love to hear from everybody. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel. I release guitar-related content throughout the week. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.